One of the things that Ron mentioned to me when I was talking with him was pre 1815 how most of the forests in California had about 40% were canopy, and now it's like 80 to 90%. So that just kind of gives perspective to how
Yeah.
much the overgrowth really is. So I want to be conscious of time, but could you go a little bit into kind of like the history of logging and kind of what you were mentioning there, and what happened to that kind of get us to the point now, and kind of where you were kind of hinting at it along the edges there of potentially going back to logging in some capacity, but kind of
Yeah.
run through that a little bit.
Yeah. I'll try and just give you like the super Cliff Notes version. And my knowledge is really fairly limited to California because that's what I'm most interested in. Um, but this comes from growing up in a town that really was an extractive industries town. Nevada City, California was founded during the gold rush. It was one of the boom towns built on gold. And then when the gold ran out, it kind of crashed, and people looked around and and saw timber, and that was kind of the next thing. Um, During the gold rush, they basically cut down all of the trees for beams to support the mines. They built these amazing flumes to take water from high up on a river and then move it down, and so you have this pressure to create a giant stream of water to blast away the
Right.
hillside and filter out the gold. And those just went for miles and miles and miles, and took a lot of timber. So if you look at the pictures um, of Nevada City post gold rush, and it's just desolate. There's no there's no trees, and everything in town was a muddy mess. And so then in California, the kind of all of the trees grew back at the same time. They so you had this everything, instead of being a staggered forest of different ages and heights, you had everything growing back at once, um, and then being clear cut as soon as it was ready. Um, and that kind of continued more or less. You see these. Um, it depended on the price of timber, and there were some years where there wasn't as much logging, some years where it was more. But there's graphs of timber production from Forest Service land, and it kind of just kept creeping up as they learned more ways of extracting more timber and growing trees quickly. And but the general idea was, this is the one purpose. We're going to just get as much wood from this land as possible, and we're really not going to worry about what happens downstream or to other species that depend on the forest, or really recreation at all, or people that want a beautiful place to be. And then when I come into the scene, I was born in 1978, and so that's sort of well into the environmental movement. And so my parents were these Berkeley hippies who moved up to this little town to get back to the land and shelter their child from the evils of modern technology. I was learning to walk, and I was falling on the concrete sidewalk and skinning my knees, and my dad was like, this is not acceptable. We need to go somewhere softer. We need to get back to the garden.
That's great.
um, so so we move up to this town that's sort of one of the last remaining um, industries. There is timber, and try and stop it. Me and my mom went and tagged trees. Put signs around trees that were a certain diameter in a proposed shopping center to see if we could stop that from being cut down. And we failed. It became a shopping center, and but the work was really being done by the spotted owl and the court cases. This was really this test case for the Endangered Species Act, and it found that really you could just say stop. This entire industry needs to stop in order to protect this one animal. And in California, really, at least on public land, it stopped logging completely. And there's still some big private timber production, but they have to be a lot more careful about how they do things. And so that was end of the 70s into the late 80s. And then for the next 30 years, really, we, the environmentalists, we had won this fight, and we really had a chance to own the problems that came with it. Like, we couldn't blame everything anymore on the clear cutters and the timber companies. And we started to see that things were, that it was a heck of a lot of work to maintain defensible space around our houses every year. And that even if we did our best, we were fighting this losing battle, that the forests were going to burn sooner or later, and things were getting worse year after year. And so there's been this just fascinating evolution where these deep green environmentalists and gray-haired hippies are saying, gosh, we need some form of sustainable timber production. There's it's going to be ugly. A tree stump is not as beautiful as a full-grown sugar pine, but it makes sense we want that wood, and we want to keep our forests healthy, and so there's some I think there's a spectrum. The sort of more romantic environmentalists will say, like, yes, we need more fire, but let's not actually touch it, and God forbid we introduce commerce into it and maybe sell some of this or use it for our own gain. And on the more pragmatic end, you have people like me who are saying, look, let's do the best we can, and it's awfully hypocritical to be saying, don't touch the trees in my backyard for timber when you're also buying wood for your houses and for your toilet paper and what have you.